The Klingon spy laughed as he eased back in the chair. It had been so easy to steal the freighter from the Federation starbase, and now here he was, with the secret plans in his possession, heading for a rendezvous past the asteroid belt on the outer reaches of the system, a rendezvous with the Klingon D7 Battlecruiser Destructor. But a beep from the scanner caught his attention. He looked and saw that there was a ship way behind, but closing fast. On closer investigation, he saw that it was a Federation heavy cruiser, the USS Ajax. With a curse, his fingers moved swiftly over the controls, urging as much speed as he could out of the freighter. But the Ajax was catching up fast. The asteroid belt loomed ahead, and he hoped that the Destructor was just on the other side, waiting for him. Yes, today on Dragon's Teeth, we're playing Starfleet Battles. Hi folks, I'm Rob Poyton. Thanks for joining me. Greetings. Yes, today it's a Starfleet Battles battle report. Now, as you'll know, if you're a regular on the channel, SFB is one of my favourite ever games. Played it a huge amount back in the 80s. Recently dug it all out, got one of the updated or fairly recent Commander books, just so I had all the rules in one place, rather than the huge amount of binders that we used to have. But the problem is, the issue is, it seems that not many people want to play Starfleet Battles. It has something of a reputation of being an extremely complex and difficult to play game. As I've said before here, I think that's a little bit unjustified, because if you stick to the basics, it's actually pretty straightforward. Of course, you can layer in lots of other levels of detail, but just the basic rules give you a cracking game, and they're pretty easy to pick up. We had an all-day Sunday down at Bedford Gladiators yesterday, and I put something up on the WhatsApp, so if anyone wants a game of SFB, let me know. And Nigel said, yes, I'd love to have a go of that. Nigel is a similar vintage to myself, and he played a lot of SFB back in the day as well. So we're both familiar with the game. Of course, we both needed a little brush up on the rules, and there were a few things we had to check throughout. And there was one particular thing that I forgot, but we'll get to that as we go through the game. Now, the other thing SFB has a reputation for is for having long games. In fact, I remember one incident, there were about 5 or 6 of us playing. About midnight, we packed up, or most of us packed up. This was at my friend's house. He shared a house with his brother. When my friend came down in the morning to go to work, get his breakfast and everything, his brother and one of the other guys were still there playing at 7:30 in the morning. So yes, sometimes it can drag on a bit. This game, however, proved to be the exception to the rule, because it only lasted a few turns. That was partly down to the scenario, I think, the initial setup, and partly down to the ineptitude of the Klingon commander. But as I said, we're coming to that. I think what we do first of all is let's have a look at the scenario and that initial setup, and then I'll take you through the game. So as you can see, what we have is the USS Ajax in one corner, Federation heavy cruiser commanded by Captain Nigel. That is in pursuit of this stolen freighter, which is being piloted by a Klingon spy who has stolen the secret plans from the starbase. He has a rendezvous at the asteroid belt with the Klingon D7 Destructor. So the basic mission is for the Federation: capture the freighter, ideally take the spy alive, recover the plans, take him back for questioning. For the Klingon side, the aim is to get the spy back safely aboard the D7 with the plans, and then make their escape. Now, as you'll see, there's a big asteroid belt in the middle of the board here. I'd never played with an asteroid belt like this before. I mean, maybe we did back in the day, but you know what the old memory's like. I can't remember. So I thought I'd throw this in just for something a little bit different for both of us. And also, I think when you have a feature like this, it tends to keep the game focused in on that feature. One thing Nigel was saying, and I agree, was sometimes you have these sort of sprawling space battles, especially if you've got a few ships per side, then things can get very spread out as people come in, fire, go back again. If you have this central feature, then I think that tends to bring the play into a much closer area. And of course, when one of the objectives is a ship that's going through that terrain feature or around it, as happened, then that also concentrates the play in this area. So that's the scenario. Let's have a look at the ships. So here's our Klingon D7 Battlecruiser, the Destructor. I decided it was the year 165, so this has the 165 refit, which gives it the extra shields. Standard Klingon Battlecruiser, 4 disruptors, phaser 2s, and a couple of drone racks. And this was type 3 drones. I think they have a speed of 12 and a warhead of 12 as well. And there's our Federation heavy cruiser, the Ajax. Again, it's the year 165, so this has the year 160 and the year 165 refits. It's got a couple of phaser 3s, it's got those extra shields, and it has a drone rack as well. So I decided that as both sides knew there'd probably be a fight, then everyone is fully charged and fully prepared. The photon torpedoes have been charged up. They're being held, which I think is 1 point of energy for each for being held. And the D7 could have had the disruptors charged, but instead I thought, me being the Klingon captain, I'll put everything into movement, because what the D7 needs to do is get as close as it can to that freighter before the heavy cruiser gets too close. That at least was the plan. So on our first move, the D7 was moving a speed of 30, really charging in. The freighter was moving 14 throughout, that was its maximum speed, and the heavy cruiser was moving 20. So it wasn't going to catch the freighter up for at least a turn or two, but Nigel had some ideas about that. So straight away our spy in the freighter has a decision to make. Is he going to go through the asteroid belt or is he going to go around it? Now, depending on your speed, of course, if you're going pretty slow, up to about, I think it's 6 or 7, then you're not going to take any damage going through the asteroid belt. Faster than that, and you have to roll a d6. And of course, the higher your speed, then potentially the higher the damage, as we all found out later on. So the freighter wanted to maintain his speed. He didn't want to have to slow down, which meant rather than risk taking damage going through the asteroid belt, because of course it's a freighter, the front shield, is minimal, he decided to veer to port and go around the asteroid belt. Obviously this was relayed to the D7, who similarly changed course to come round towards the edge of the asteroid belt to meet the freighter. So that was good in one way, but it did mean that the Ajax was going to catch up a little bit. And that's exactly what happened. The Ajax is basically going as fast as it can, keeping everything charged and trying to close that distance as quickly as possible in order to at least knock down the back shield of the freighter, perhaps do some engine damage, slow it down as much as possible, get in close and board it. So for the next turn, the D7 of course now needs to charge its disruptors. It's only 2 points each for your standards, and they of course fire every turn. But 2 points for 4 disruptors, that's 8 points of warp energy. Of course, the D7 is going to have to slow down. So the D7 speed on turn 2 was 18 and is intent on getting in close to the freighter. The freighter is still going 14, of course. I can imagine the Klingon spy pushing it, and the whole thing is vibrating and shaking. He's going a steady 14. And the Ajax has managed to maintain its speed because it's not fired its torpedoes yet. The phasers are all charged, so the Ajax starts to close in. And it is during turn 2 that the first firing takes place, with a spread of photon torpedoes from the Ajax. But the range was a little long, and unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, they all missed. So a spread of photon torpedoes whizzed harmlessly off into space, I suspect the spy on the freighter was a little bit relieved about that, and he continued doggedly on towards the D7. So now the range really starts to close. The D7 fires off its disruptors at the Ajax, gets some hits, does a fair bit of damage on one of the shields, but nothing too bad yet. There's a bit of phaser fire exchanged as well, again without any spectacular results. And at this point the destructor also puts up a couple of drones. As I said, they're speed 12, so they're not super quick, but these things have a way of creeping up on you if you're not careful. However, having said that, of course the Ajax does have that anti-drone rack and 2 phaser 3s as well. So to be honest, a couple of drones like this shouldn't cause too much of a problem. So as we move turn 2 into turn 3, this is where the Klingon captain made a grave error because he didn't check the rules properly. What he should have done is, as soon as he was in 5 hexes of the freighter, dropped a shield and transported the spy off onto the D7. However, there were a couple of concerns with that. Well, one, I forgot to assign any energy to the transporter. Of course, afterwards I realised I could have used a battery. The other thing was, being this close to the heavy cruiser at that time, I was a bit wary about dropping a shield. I think when you drop a shield for a transporter, it has to stay dropped for at least a quarter of a turn. And, you know, the heavy cruiser was moving quite fast, so that could have been a risky strategy. Instead, I thought, I'll let the freighter go past, I'll confront the Ajax because I have a cunning plan, and we'll see if we can do enough damage to perhaps, you know, slow it down at least. It almost worked. So turn 3 was where the cunning plan came into play. This really was a risky strategy. It was all on the throw of a dice pretty much. But the D7 dropped its speed down to 7 because it put energy into overloading the disruptors, and also 5 points of warp energy into a high energy turn. Now, when you perform a high energy turn, there is a chance that your ship will break down. The breakdown value on the D7 is 5 or 6. So effectively, you roll a 6-sided dice if you HET. If you get a 5 or 6, then your ship groans, creaks, grunts, and stops. Not a good place to be. However, I did remember, and I checked it in the rules, that on your first HET, you get a -2. So effectively, I wasn't going to break down. And also, the Ajax had fired its photon torpedoes previously. That means it's another turn before they're ready to fire again. And of course, energy has to put in. The more energy going into arming the photon torpedoes, then the slower the ship is going to be. So that was the plan. At the opportune time, I think the range was down to 5 hexes. The D7 did an HET, span round on the spot to face the Ajax, let loose with 4 overloaded disruptors, and they all hit. That took out what was left of the shield, and we got 12 internal hits as well. Now, the thing is with the Federation ships, they've got a lot of hull boxes, so a lot of the damage was soaked up by the hull boxes. Crew quarters, the holodeck, the jacuzzi, all that sort of thing. But, you know, there was a couple of warp engine hits there, and I think one of the phasers went as well. So that was a good start. And, of course, immediately after that, we let loose with the phasers as well before the Ajax had a chance to move, and did some more internal hits. So things were looking okay at that moment. The drones were there as well, of course. They got taken out easily as expected by the phaser 3s and the anti-drone, so no real effect for those. But here, of course, is where the Federation start firing back, and the heavy cruiser's got quite a lot of phasers, and they're all phaser 1s as well. So what he had within his firing arcs, Nigel fired one lot of phasers at the freighter and the other lot at the D7. With the freighter, he knocked out the back shield and did a few internal hits. A couple of warp boxes were hit there, slowing the freighter down a little bit more. And the damage on the D7 was about half of one of the shields gone, so no internal hits there. But what this meant for the next turn is the heavy cruiser was able to get past the D7 and on to the freighter. The freighter's going a little bit slower now. I think the freighter's moving at 12. the heavy cruiser is able to catch up, and because that rear shield has gone on the freighter, Nigel was able to drop his front shield, transport in, transport out. You know, he sent the red shirts across. Miraculously, I think they all survived. They nab the spy and transport back to the Ajax. Job done, at least part of the job done. The D7, meanwhile, is swinging around and trying to catch up. There's a bit more phaser fire, there's a couple more drones go up, and there's disruptors fired again. So a little bit more damage on the Ajax, but nothing to stop him getting away. And this is where the asteroid belt came into play again, because Nigel decided his best route, rather than turn and come back past the D7, was just to go straight through the asteroid field at a speed of 20. Now, this was an extremely risky strategy because, as I mentioned before, every hex that he moved into that is part of the asteroid belt, he's got to roll a d6 and potentially take damage. And I think there were 5 hexes he had to get through. The Destructor decided to fire its phasers while the Federation was at the closest range possible, scratched the back shields a bit. The Ajax returned fire and managed to knock down about a third of the front shield of the D7. Anyway, so now the heavy cruiser is going through the asteroid belt and the D7 is in pursuit but skirting the asteroid belt. Nigel made 5 rolls. The first one did 15 points of damage, the second one did 15, and the third one did 20. So the front shield's gone. There's a huge amount of internal hits, but fortunately on his last 2 hexes he rolled a 1 each time, which was no damaged. So the Ajax was extremely battered. You'll see from the SSD sheets here just how much damage it took in the end, but it was a way through the asteroid belt. The D7 turned in to follow, but again started taking damage straight away. That quickly took down the front shield. So again, the D7 is now taking internal hits by travelling through the asteroid belt. You know, they could only take a couple of those. In effect, they gave up, they turned away. They're not going to catch the Ajax. The Ajax has got the spy. I think it's time to limp back to base. And I can't see the promotion prospects of that captain being very good when he brings the D7 back. And when they say, well, Coy, you must have been in a real tough fight. Well, yeah, I took a few phaser hits, but then I got hit by a load of rocks. You know, it's not a good look, is it? The Ajax, meanwhile, mission accomplished, but at quite a high cost, we could argue. Lots of internal damage on the Ajax, lots of repairs for the engineer and the crew to make. But the important thing, they got the spy, they got the secret plans. So, a Federation victory. A nice quick game then, very exciting. Starfleet Battles is always eventful. One of the things I like about it is you have everything planned out, you think, but because you play through these 32 impulses, and obviously your movement is charted through those impulses, but you can fire at any point, you can use your transporters or launch drones, whatever it is at any point. It's very much a game about timing and position. And if you get your timing or position wrong, or if you get things entirely, yeah, I think as well as the captain, the transporter officer is going to be demoted as well. What was he on his phone checking his messages or something when he should have been operating the transporter? Perhaps that's my excuse. It wasn't me. It was a transporter officer. So yeah, that's what makes Starfleet Battle such a good game, I think, is it ratchets up a lot of tension and things can change, the situation can change very quickly at any point during the turn. Nigel played a great game. He had the tactics exactly right, fast ahead, full ahead, knock out the back shields, grab the spy. His captain may get questioned about coming back at speed 20 odd through the asteroid field, but you know, you have to take risks when you captain the starship, right? He got the job done. There we go then, a defeat for the Klingons, but a very enjoyable game. Thanks very much to Nigel for joining me. I'd love to get some more SFB going. Perhaps if we can get 2 or 3 more players involved, we can run a small fleet action with a few ships on each side. There's tons of interesting scenarios in the rules. Of course, there's a lot of scenario books out there and stuff online as well. So there's no shortage of material. And I'm on a Facebook group for SFB. I'll put the link in the notes below. And it seems like in the States in particular, or certain areas of the States, SFB is really thriving. They've got competitions going on, they've got campaigns, they've got regular SFB sessions, all sorts of stuff. So it's nice to see that the game is still out there and it's still being played and enjoyed by so many people. Okay, that's it for today. I'm going to beam out of here. Thanks very much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any tips or tactics, like read the rules, do let me know. Or perhaps you could let me know what you would have done in that position. Do you think the Klingon or the Federation could have done something differently to assure their victory? Pop something down in the comments below. And as always, if you haven't already, please do like, share and subscribe. I'll see you next time.